Hello, welcome to my podcast. If you love liberty, economic freedom, guns, science, and media, you're at the right place. Of course, my main focus is on politics. However, this is my podcast, so I will do whatever I want. So, come on, jump on board. So, this segment will be called News Buzz, or The News Buzz. Basically, what this segment will be is I will go over some headlines and general information. The News Buzz will include things that I might not talk about in this specific show, that I might cover later, but I'll use it to kick off every episode before continuing with the show so you can get an idea of what's going on around the world. And the News Buzz may or may not follow a specific theme. It may or not be related to politics. And in this case, it's a little random. It's just giving you an idea of what is happening around the world, both micro and macro. So without further ado, let us get started. A blood test may be able to detect 8 types of cancer. That's fantastic. The Uber co-founder, Travis Kalanick, a billionaire after a $9.3 billion investment deal. That is capitalism in the free market at its finest. You can get rich off of simple inventions. I am disappointed that I did not think of something like Uber a long time ago. At least 16 people were pummeled by rocks during volcanic eruptions at a Japan ski resort, which caused an avalanche. Well, that sounds like a blast. A Georgia State University student athlete withdraws after using the N-word on social media. And let's make sure that we note that this student, is Hispanic. Hawaii governor took a long time to post on Twitter about the missile alert because he forgot his username and password. And these are the people that you want to write healthcare policy. Just keep that in mind. A professor from Wentworth Institute of Technology had to tell his students not to eat Tide Pods. People going to school to learn how to design the next central processing unit for your iPhone need to be reminded not to eat chemicals used for cleaning laundry. Keep that in mind. A man was arrested for threatening to kill CNN employees. Well, what a dick. Seth Meyers, a late-night comedian, did a brave thing and talked crap about Donald Trump. Because following the same formula that every late-night comedy show does is really brave. It takes a special type of courage to tell your audience what they already want to hear. You may have noticed that I sounded a little bit condescending on that last part. Yes, I did, because they are not brave. You can criticize President Donald Trump. You have the right to. There are specific criticisms. There are valid criticisms. I'll go with my original line of that. There are specific criticisms that are 100% valid, that are objective and not subjective. Donald Trump is a piece of crap person. He's cheated on almost every single one of his wives, if not every single wife. There was the new recent allegation that came out. Allegation, maybe it's confirmed, I'm not sure at this point, but basically porn star Stormy Daniels came out and confirmed that Donald Trump paid her to have sex with him, and he made some comments about how she was a smart and intelligent, beautiful woman, just like his daughter. I don't know if that part was confirmed, but it pretty much, as far as I know, the allegation still stands that he slept with porn star Stormy Daniels after his current wife, Melania Trump, had his child. I think it was a year after or just after, around that time period. Without further ado, let's get started. So, some topics I'm going to cover, or some news that I'm going to cover. A court which is forcing Ben Carson to be a civil rights champion for a day. Alveda King defends Trump against racism accusations. The GOP tax bill, we're going to talk about whether or not the GOP tax bill looks like it will boost Republican odds in 2018. We will talk about Oprah's bid for president, or potential bid for president. And we'll talk about the Democrat who is basically promising to embrace Trump. And he is running for governor of Ohio. So, without further ado, let's get started with the first story, which happens to be titled, "A Court is Forcing Ben Carson to be a Civil Rights Champion for a Day." So, I'm getting my sources, Oprah.com. I think that's how you pronounce it. The article is written by Rachel M. Cohen, and it was published the 2nd of January. But this has been a case that has been happening. So let me read. Ben Carson will soon deliver a major victory for civil rights activists on behalf of the Trump administration, implementing a new rule that will give more than 200,000 low-income families in 24 cities significantly improved access to housing in high-income neighborhoods. Carson, however, has not suddenly become a champion of civil rights now that he is Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. The rule was crafted by the Obama administration, and a court ordered the Trump administration to enforce. The policy attempts to resolve a seeming defect in the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's housing voucher program. That vouchers are worth the same amount across the entire region. That means most voucher holders can't afford to move into wealthier neighborhoods because their subsidy isn't large enough to cover rent. Landlords in poor neighborhoods can in turn price gouge voucher holders who have nowhere else to go. The new rule requires public housing authorities to alter the way they calculate rent subsidies, effectively making vouchers worth more in affluent areas and worth less in poorer communities. The federal judge, Beryl Howell, disagreed in her 47-page decision. This case is about the rule of law, whether an agency effectively may suspend a duly promulgated regulation without observing the procedures or identifying relevant factual criteria that the law requires to effect such a change, Howell wrote. Of course, she disagrees with the Trump administration. Beryl Howell is an Obama appointee. But what I find so baffling about her statement about how this case is about, quote, rule of law, unquote. The Department of House and Urban Development is a cabinet department in the executive branch of the federal government. There are those who will get tired of, but in the Constitution, or the Constitution says, or the Constitution doesn't say, and there are those that legitimately hate the Constitution. But this is a federal judge. Let's recite the oath that federal judges and justices take under U.S. Code 453, Oaths of Justices and Judges, shall we? I, blank, blank, so in this case, I, Beryl Howell, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will administer justice without respect to persons and do equal right to the poor and to the rich, and that I will faithfully and impartially discourage and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as blank judge under the Constitution and laws of the United States. So help me God. Therefore, the constitutional argument is valid, especially when you're talking about federal judges. Where in the Constitution does it give the executive branch the ability to write laws about housing? It doesn't. Also, how is this a civil rights... Okay, before I go on to the civil rights issue. Constitutional argument, that program, that department that is run by the executive branch under the federal government is unconstitutional. You could probably pull up some obscure thing about how Congress approved it. But I don't even want to get onto the Constitution argument because I just go on and rant, and it doesn't get me anywhere. So I'll leave that behind. What I really want to touch on is how they get the idea that this is somehow a civil rights issue. It isn't. It has nothing to do with civil rights at all. It has everything to do with ideology. You want to talk about civil rights, okay? I mean, we can talk about civil rights all day. I mean, we can look at the Declaration of Independence, which basically goes over the rights of man in a way. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying in its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. You want to talk about a right? How about the right to be free? A civil right, the rights to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Not the right to have happiness. Nobody owes you that. But you want to talk about rights. It's not giving people free stuff. It's not giving them a voucher to have houses in richer neighborhoods. You're basically redistributing wealth is what you're doing. Here, you're poor for whatever reason. I'm not going to say that they are self-induced, that they are in a self-induced state of poverty. That's not what I'm going to say at all. But giving them a voucher to go live in a richer neighborhood that they have not themselves earned, or basically inflating their sense of wealth, their sense of purchasing power that they do not actually have, that you took from one person to another person, is not a civil right. The fact that we think that's a civil right is unbelievable to me. That's like saying, hey, all I have... Now, this is an analogy that's not exactly the same, so I know that this analogy can fall apart easily, but I'm just making an analogy to show you how conflating vouchers to live in richer neighborhoods as a civil right is beyond stupid. So, again, say all I have is top ramen. All I can afford is top ramen. I get a voucher so I can buy some steaks. Some perfectly cut, tender steaks. The most expensive cut of beef that you can find. I mean, grass-fed cows. Grass-fed beef. Slaughtered. No processing at all. No preservatives. Fed a natural diet. A non-GMO diet. And you give me a voucher in the name of civil rights so I can go buy that. And it is so counterintuitive to everything that we... Sorry about that noise, guys. I have a dog. Again, sorry about that noise. My pup woke up not too long ago, and he had something hidden underneath his crate somehow that he pushed under there with his nose, and he was scratching at it, trying to get to it. That's what you deal with having a 6-month-old pup. Okay, without further ado, but to conflate that with civil rights, a voucher to move into a neighborhood that you haven't earned, that calling that civil rights is unbelievable. You can say that you have a right to try to move into a more wealthy neighborhood, a safer neighborhood, but you have to fix your communities. And I'll explain why conflating that with civil rights, the traditional definition of civil rights, the traditional idea of what we considered civil rights, is insulting. So let's go over some more rights. All you gotta do is open up the Constitution of the United States and just basically go through the Bill of Rights. That's all you have to do. The first amendments to the Constitution ever implemented, which happened to be the Bill of Rights. So, I mean, basically in the preamble of the Bill of Rights, they explain that the House and the Senate... Well, okay, I'm not even going to go over the preamble of the Civil Rights. Let's just go over... Sorry, the Bill of Rights. Let's go over the Bill of Rights. The First Amendment, probably one of the most important. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That is a right. Now, tell me how that is related to here's some money to go buy a house. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have, I mean, I could argue that, but I'm not arguing that we shouldn't have programs to help people leave poverty and go into different neighborhoods. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm more or less talking about the article and the judge conflating that with civil rights. It's really just an attempt to make Ben Carson and the Trump administration look bad. And trust me, you can make Donald Trump and his administration look bad without conflating the definition of civil rights. Now let's go over the Second Amendment, which whether or not you agree or disagree with, or whether or not you think it says one thing or another, but let's go over it. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, to the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. That's a right. You have the right to be secure. You have the right to protect yourself. You have the right to protect your state. A free state. You have the right to protect that. And then you have the Third Amendment, which is no soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Meaning somebody with a badge or a position of authority with a firearm that works for the government can't come in and seize your property or use your property against your will. I mean, these are civil rights. You have the freedom to practice whatever religion you want, the freedom to think whatever you want, to petition your government, to peacefully assemble and protest your government. These are civil rights. This is what Martin Luther King did. This is what Malcolm X did. This is what Rosa Parks did. These people were civil rights heroes. Not this nonsense of here's a voucher, go live in a wealthier neighborhood. That's not a right at all. It's just so mind-boggling that we conflate these two. And let's talk about, so I live in the state of Oregon, so let's go over the Oregon State Bill of Rights. You have there's natural rights inherited in people that the Section 1 of the Oregon Bill of Rights, we declare that all men, when they form a social compact, are equal in right, that all power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their peace, safety, and happiness. And they have at all times a right to alter, reform, or abolish the government in such a manner as they may think proper. That is a right. That is protecting you from tyranny. From a tyranny that might oppress your civil rights, that might restrict your civil rights. In the Oregon State Bill of Rights, you have freedom of worship, freedom of religious opinion. There's no religious qualification for office. No money to be appropriated for a religion, meaning no money from the state should go to a religion. It really just, the first couple sections of the Oregon State Bill of Rights just really expands the First Amendment of the Constitution. There's freedom of speech and press. Again, they go over that. Unreasonable searches or seizures, administration of justice, rights of the accused in criminal prosecution, a right and fair trial. And again, we have double jeopardy, the rights of those who are arrested, bailable offenses, equality of privileges and immunities of citizens, imprisonment for debt. You have jury trial in civil cases, and of course the right to bear arms. These are liberties, not getting a voucher saying you can move in a richer neighborhood. So just to go over Bill of Rights even more, let's just read some quotes from our founding fathers, the author of the Declaration of Independence and the father of the Constitution. So we'll start with, when people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. A Bill of Rights is what the people are entitled to against every government, and what no just government should refuse or rest on inference. Rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will within limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. I do not add within the limits of the law, because the law is often but the tyrant's will, and always so when it violates the rights of the individual. So those are quotes from Thomas Jefferson, who is the main author of the Declaration of Independence. You want to talk about liberty? That is liberty. That is the most strict definition of liberty there is. It's the right to do something. It's the right to have freedom from tyranny. It's the right to act out your life in a manner that would allow you to pursue happiness. Okay, and let's look at James Madison. Liberty may be endangered by the abuse of liberty, but also by the abuse of power. Americans have the right and advantage of being armed, unlike the citizens of other countries, whose governments are afraid to trust people with arms. The essence of government is power, and power lodged as it must be in human hands will ever be liable to abuse. I mean, I have quotes upon quotes. This is from James Madison, the father of Constitution. I have quotes upon quotes of our founding fathers talking about liberty. And never in any of these quotes or in the Constitution, the Oregon State Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, they don't say, you have the right to get vouchers to buy firearms. You have the right to have a voucher that would allow you to advertise your words, to advertise your thoughts out to the world, to publish it in every newspaper, or have it play on every single TV. There's nothing written like that. But yeah, vouchers, enforcing a law about vouchers is civil liberties. I know I'm talking a lot about this and I'm really beating a dead horse now, but how about we go over the real civil rights activists like Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Malcolm X, Rosa Parks. Okay. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I look to a day when people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. We must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools. That's Martin Luther King. Again, talking about civil rights. He wants the freedom to do things that every human being who does not share his skin color has a right to do at that time period. He's not saying, oh, freedom, civil liberties is giving me a voucher so I can live in neighborhoods that I want to. They're separate issues. One is welfare, or anti-poverty program. This is freedom. Civil rights are freedom. So let's go over some Gandhi quotes. An eye for an eye only ends up making the world blind. Nobody can hurt me without my permission. Anger and intolerance are the enemies of correct understanding. These are civil liberty activists. I can't make that any more clear. So let's look at Malcolm X. Be peaceful, be courteous, obey the law, respect everyone. But if someone puts his hand on you, send him to the cemetery. Meaning, if somebody is trying to violate your rights, you fight back and use force if necessary. You can't separate peace from freedom because no one can be at peace unless he has his freedom. Again, a voucher to live in a richer neighborhood is not freedom, it's an entitlement. It's a welfare program. It's, I don't have to fight and make myself better to live in a wealthier neighborhood. It's freedom to get something handed down to you. And a quote from Rosa Parks. As far back as I can remember, I knew there was something wrong with our way of life when people could be mistreated because of the color of their skin. So let's go over what's not civil rights. We will have programs dedicated to giving you free stuff. Imagine one of them making this quote. Or we will have full taxpayer programs to provide housing for you. I think I've beaten that dead horse enough. Let's move on. I know I'm probably getting pretty annoying for the first 20 minutes I'm talking about civil liberties. So this comes from the Washington Examiner. There were multiple news sources talking about it, which was Alveda King defending Trump against racism accusations, basically stating that black Americans are benefiting from his presidency. Martin Luther King Jr.'s niece defended President Trump against accusations of racism by pointing to the economic opportunities for black Americans. I do not believe President Donald John Trump is racist. The economy's up, jobs are up in the black community. There is great promise to get a lot of people who have been unfairly incarcerated out, Alveda King told Trump, Fox and Friends on Monday. Sorry. I misquoted that. This is a terrible episode. The federal holiday honoring her... Sorry. She said this on the federal holiday honoring her uncle, Martin Luther King Jr. Trump was called racist after he referred to Haiti, El Salvador, and African nations as shithole countries. During a discussion on immigration with lawmakers, Trump has denied he is a racist after days of intense backlash against his comments. "I am the least racist person you will ever interview," Trump told reporters at his Florida resort Sunday. King said Trump's presidency is helping the black community because the unemployment rate for black workers fell to the lowest rate on record last month. "The president is working for America, period, as he is draining the swamp and African Americans are benefiting. Our jobs are going up, our unemployment is going down. Companies are saying they are going to raise their own minimum wage and do business because of the tax cuts. So the president is helping the African American community, and I don't believe Donald Trump is a racist." So Alveda King brings up a very good point. Donald Trump's economic policies, or repeal of policies, is helping the black community. Do you know what historical racist Democrat politicians would do? They would actively use their power to restrict the rights of minorities, to restrict their, as we call them, civil liberties. They would do this to minorities they didn't like. That's what somebody who is racist would do. Jim Crow is a fabulous example. Jim Crow laws. But this isn't happening in the black community. Trump isn't saying, all right, so we're going to have segregation again. He's not putting black people on trains and moving them to poorer neighborhoods. And we can make an argument about whether or not the war on drugs is hurting the black community. I happen to think it is. I think it does affect the black community most, and that is a huge obstacle that is in the way of the black community. With that being said, it's not the same thing as Jim Crow. It's not the same thing as what Adolf Hitler did to the Jews during World War II, well, before and during World War II. We're not putting black people in the Holocaust. And so far, the most questionable thing Donald Trump has done, as far as racism goes, was speak out against certain immigrants. And partially that can be explained away by Mexicans happen to be the single biggest block of immigration. The single biggest flux of migrants. I'm trying to figure out how to word that. I mean, you can say that most immigrants are Mexican, but the biggest group of immigrants are Mexican. So, whether or not that's racist, listen, we can argue about it all day. I would say that's not necessarily racist, but I would say it's singling out a specific group based on the statistical fact that they are the biggest block of immigrants coming to the United States. I tend to be less of a hawk on immigration. I think immigration helps a country. I do think we should have security, though. I don't believe in open borders necessarily. So, there's that, but... And why is it racist to say that a shithole country is a shithole country? I never understood that. Do you know what they do to you in Africa? You can look up any video on this. If you happen to be of a different religion, if you happen to steal something like drugs, if you happen to double cross your employer, they will gut you alive. Literally gut you alive. Because there's that quote, "I'll gut you alive." You know, there's that threat. But this is literal. They will gut you alive. Oh, I can't talk. They will gut you alive. Look up any video where they will take a hacksaw, they will take a machete, they will take a knife, and they will chop off their victim's hands while they are alive. They will slit their throat while they're alive. They will stab them to death while they're alive. You want to talk about mutilation for any of the vegans out there? Look at what they're doing in Africa. It is pointless killing because you stole something, because you disagreed with them, because you're in the wrong territory. It's like if some person walks through my backyard, so I grab a machete, chop off their hand, and mutilate them. It's not even an execution that you would tend to think of an execution as. We're not talking about guillotines or hangings or a bullet to the head or an injection. We're talking about human mutilation. These countries, some of them are shitholes. It's not racist to say. It's unprofessional to say. It's not something I expect from my leader, but it's not racist. You can get called racist for anything these days. So we should talk about whether or not the GOP tax bill, or we should analyze the GOP tax bill, increasing the prospects for Republicans in the 2018 election, the midterm elections. So American support for recently signed Republican tax reform bill is soaring, growing 9% in favorability since Christmas. 46% of Americans either strongly or somewhat approve of the law as of early January, compared to just 37% when the bill was entering the final stages of debate in late December. Americans are becoming increasingly optimistic when there's a typo in the article. When evaluating their own finances and the overall economy, this optimism is likely due to large stock market gains, increasing economic growth, and other positive economic indicators. Big businesses and leaders are also increasingly positive about the state and future of American economy. JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon thinks 4% economic growth this year is absolutely a possibility. The economy is doing quite well, Jamie Dimon told Fox Business's Maria Bartiromo earlier in January. If we have a couple of years of good growth, that could justify the markets where they are. 4% economic growth this year is possible. The U.S. economy grew at a 3.2% annual rate in the third quarter of 2017, posting the best back-to-back quarterly growth rates in 3 years. Strong growth is only expected to continue, as some economists are anticipating stronger fourth quarter growth figures following the passage of the GOP tax reform bill. The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis economists research team estimates that there is only a 4% chance the U.S. economy enters a recession. So this is good. Despite the rhetoric of the Democrats, nearly half of all Americans support tax reform in some manner. It's not the best, and it's not where I want the reform to stop. However, I see value in this small increment. It's careful and it's strategic. It's a way of implementing tax reform without burning the whole system down. The year is still young, and we saw a nearly 9% increase in support for the tax cuts in less than a month. So it'll be interesting to see what will happen in the next month, or even the next 6 months as midterm elections get closer. You don't have to support Donald Trump to understand that this is a good bill. All right, lower the corporate income tax and watch businesses expand. Lower prices or innovate more. That's what will happen if you lower the corporate income tax, which is good for the working class. If you lower the income tax rate, watch the middle class have more disposable income to either splurge or invest. And if this does get Republicans elected or give them better odds, I certainly hope it's not rhinos that are being elected to office. I'd like to see actual free market conservatives and libertarians to get elected instead of the usual politician that'll run on cutting taxes but ends up voting to expand government based on party lines. Oh, look, this Republican is advocating for a bill that will increase government spending by $200 million. Let's vote for that because he's a Republican, I'm a Republican. That crap pisses me off. Or when a Democrat is in office, apparently all of a sudden Democrats are not anti-spying on Americans. They're not anti-NSA. They are pro-surveillance when a Democrat president is in office, and then Republicans all of a sudden become anti-surveillance. It's unbelievable. Partisan politics sometimes is annoying. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like gridlock. I really do like gridlock because that's when the government grows the least amount. One thing you have to understand about me is I'm a classical liberal, a Jeffersonian classical liberal. I think the government should be, I wouldn't say, it needs to be limited by a rule of law. We need a rule of law that protects the rights of the individual from government and from other individuals. I'm not an anarchist, and I wouldn't be offended if you called me a libertarian, but I consider myself a Jeffersonian classical liberal. However, talking about the GOP tax reform, I would like to see a budget decrease, but judging based on the recent government shutdown, the budget's only going to increase, despite not having enough money to actually support our spending. But that's neither here or now. I think we need to talk about one important thing, or one controversial thing, one trending thing. That is Oprah Winfrey for 2020. And in some cases, people are advocating Oprah Winfrey and Michelle Obama on the same ticket for the Democratic Party. Well, there's good news for us who are tired of seeing reality TV stars or celebrities thinking that they can just run for office. In my opinion, nobody's really qualified to run for office. But, I mean, Oprah just seems like a political talking point, in my opinion. Well, it turns out that Oprah Winfrey isn't polling well for 2020. New polls suggest that Oprah Winfrey wouldn't fare well if she ran for the Democratic nomination, especially against male counterparts. After a politically charged speech at the Golden Globe Awards, political commenters started to speculate on the possibility of Oprah Winfrey running against Donald Trump in the 2020 election. According to a political poll, her lead over Donald Trump is within the margin of error. Winfrey leads Trump 40-38 in the general election, according to the polls. And it should be noted that in Florida, which is a key state for Republicans to hold on to the entire election, Donald Trump beats Oprah Winfrey. Let's see. She also didn't poll well in the Democratic nomination. 22% of voters, however, were undecided in the head-to-head matchup. So, but usually elections come down to those 22% voters in the swing states, mostly. So, Florida, Ohio, and other states like that, Michigan. All these swing states are in play, and those are the votes that they usually go after. She also didn't poll well in the Democratic nomination. She only polled better than the other two lead females who might possibly run for the Democratic nomination. She polled better than Elizabeth Warren, thank God, and Kirsten Gillibrand. When polled with Senator Bernie Sanders and Vice President Joe Biden, her male counterparts polled better than her. Oprah Winfrey, as of January 17th, 2018, hasn't said anything about actually running for president. CalDrop co-founder and chief researcher at Morning Consultant told Politico that while 78% of Democrats have a positive opinion of her, only 38% think she should run for office. So this, I guess I will tread some ground. This is where I happen to agree with Democrats. It seems like a logical thing to say, hey, maybe celebrities shouldn't run for president. I mean, I'm not totally against the idea of a celebrity running for president because, like I said, I don't really think anybody's qualified to really be president and have as much power in the current state of politics. I think the president right now, the federal government, especially the executive branch, has too much power, in my honest opinion, according to my ideology, according to where my morals and political philosophy line up. That is my opinion. And, I mean, we do have to take this with a grain of salt, simply because Donald Trump was supposed to lose the election. Although I take that into account, the polls only counting the popular vote. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they did it by a state-by-state basis, and it showed that Hillary Clinton won every election. Maybe it had to do with voter turnout in some states because they thought Hillary had it in the bag and therefore they didn't show up to vote because they thought she would already win. I don't know. I need to look at the polling data a little more, but basically Donald Trump won through the Electoral College. And the reason why I believe this poll or see it as valid is because Politico is left-leaning. They are not a right-leaning news organization. Let's be 100% clear about that. They are left-leaning, okay, if we're being honest. So they wouldn't really have any reason to lie about it, lie and say that Donald Trump probably would beat Oprah within the margin of error, if we're including the margin of error. So that's why I believe the polling data. And also, let's not forget that anything's possible. Maybe she'll become more popular as 2020 approaches. Because right now, it's only 2018, and anything can change within a couple of years, even just a few months and a few weeks. Things change quick by the snap of a finger. Before you know it, things are radically different. So let's go over the last article. This brings me some optimism, kind of. But it also worries me a little bit because I don't know exactly what it means. So, former Democratic congressman and 2008 presidential candidate Dennis Kucinich, is that how you pronounce his name? Declared his candidacy for Ohio governor on Fox and Friends Wednesday. Today, I'm having formal announcement for candidacy. I'm running for governor of Ohio, the Democratic nomination, he said. I'm really charged this morning. And I'm very excited to take this big step forward on behalf of the people of Ohio. Host Steve Doocy pointed out how President Donald Trump won Ohio by more than 8 points and asked how Kucinich, a liberal Democrat, would appeal to middle America voters. I think I represent the mainstream and aspirations for jobs in healthcare and education and for a better environment and all kinds of economic progress in the state, Kucinich replied. He then pivoted from liberal priorities and also embraced stances important to the Trump voter base, including the economy and financial markets. I know there is another Democrat in Ohio who would run for office, and do. I can reach out to the people who voted for President Trump. I can show them that there are Democrats who stand solidly for economic progress. We want to protect our markets. We want to stand up for everyday Americans, he continued. That's my constituency, too. Kucinich added, I'm reaching out and I'm not going to leave anyone out of the picture. Earlier this month, Kucinich warned Democrats not to focus on impeaching Trump and said focusing on economic growth would be the best thing for the party and the American people. So assuming that he actually believes in what he says and that he's not just pandering or saying stuff that everybody wants to hear for the sake of votes. He's not lying for votes, basically. Let's assume that. I guess it's kind of good that some Democrats are embracing progress, whether or not it's from Democrats or Republicans. Because there seems to be a lot of partisan politics where a Republican can get up and can speak liberal policies in a speech, as we saw with the most recent speech from Donald Trump, to the point where even the Young Turks were like, yeah, that was a good speech. But a lot of the Democrat politicians, senators, and congressmen didn't clap for him, especially when they should have. They had to make it seem like they were the resistance against Donald Trump because it's a Republican and it's Donald Trump. God forbid that we applaud somebody from across the aisle when they talk about something that we agree with. I feel like in some weird alternate reality, Rand Paul could win the presidency and he could get up and say, all right, I changed my opinion. I changed my mind. I think we need universal health care. So I think we need to work on the government writing laws, good laws, and creating policy to ensure that every single American has cheaper access to healthcare. I can almost guarantee that a quarter, if not most of the Democrats, wouldn't even clap or give him a standing ovation. Watch them criticize him or tear him down from this mantle and say, well, the policies that he's going to write, they're going to bankrupt the country. It's not going to work. I feel like that would happen. Of course, I'm just speculating, and I am applying motive, and I'm speaking of something that isn't a probability, because Rand Paul getting up and advocating for universal health care, that would probably never happen. Although I do admire gridlock in politics, because that's when the government grows less. Also, it doesn't. So I read his campaign page, the Democrat, Dennis Kucinich. I read his campaign page. He doesn't give anything specific about what his economic policies are. He just says, under me, jobs will soar. We will see an increase in employment. Wages will rise. Basically stuff like that. He doesn't lay out a plan. He doesn't say... He has talking points, basic Democratic talking points, with no plan, it seems like. Even when he talks about healthcare and criminal justice reform, he doesn't say anything. He just states a problem and offers no solution. There's no roadmap for how he's going to implement certain policies in Ohio. There's no structure. There's no foundation. We need healthcare for average Americans. I think Americans care about healthcare. Okay, well, what are you going to do about it? Well, first of all, we need to find a way to give healthcare to Americans, to allow Americans to purchase healthcare or have access to healthcare. Okay, so how are you going to do that? Well, first of all, we're going to find a way to provide healthcare to Americans. That's basically what his campaign site says. I get that it's not popular to get up on a podium and talk to the people that you want to elect you and bore them out of their minds about tax code, about policy, about the law. I get that that's not popular. The rhetoric is really what gets you. It's really what gets you motivated. Look at Bernie Sanders, for example. The top 1%. Even Donald Trump was guilty of this. We're going to build a wall. Trust me, I'm going to be the greatest jobs president ever. So I get that that's what politicians do. That's part of the reason why Rand Paul wasn't very popular, even though I would have preferred him as president as opposed to Donald Trump. And I think the election would have been a little more of a landslide because Rand Paul was popular among Democrats compared to Hillary Clinton. Because there are a lot of moderate Democrats who are really a Democrat for social issues and civil liberties. And maybe a slight social safety net. Other than that, they don't really follow the mantle that has been propped up by these modern-day social justice warriors or current incarnation of socialist Democrats. Most of them, I like to think, follow a more traditional Bill Clinton type of policy, although Bill Clinton has changed. But let's be honest, he's really just a shill for the Democratic Party. So his principles probably aren't going to stay, especially when his wife is running for president or when Obama's running for president. He's a shill for the Democratic Party, let's just say that. Even though, a good example for shills, Donald Trump barely was a Republican when he was running. He was only a Republican in name. But in principle and in policy and party platform, he was not a Republican. But there were still Republicans that shilled for Donald Trump, which to me was highly disappointing. But whatever, what can you do, right? Politics is strange. It's hard to wrap your mind around it sometimes. It's pretty complex. There's a lot that goes on. Lots of semantics with words. And those are all the stories that I want to talk about. I know I rambled and I wasn't making coherent sentences. I promise it will get better. I tried doing this a little differently than I usually do with my other podcast. I would actually write an entire script and just read that. But I'm trying to make it more alive. I'm trying to make it sound more genuine. I'm trying to become a better presenter and better speaker. I have this kind of working memory problem. I overthink it, and I can't think of a linear thought. I can't think of coherent sentences. I'm kind of all over the place. Believe it or not, I can write off the cuff. I can write beautiful essays and basically vomit my thoughts into art on paper, on screen, and print it out. So I'm trying out off the cuff, talking so I can progress my thinking capabilities, hopefully improve my brain a little bit. I'm a smart person, I just have a working memory problem. So without further ado, that is it, folks. Thank you for joining me on this episode. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to check out some of my other videos. much better videos. If you have any articles or news that you'd like to see covered or that you think I missed, please let me know in the comment section below. Have a good day, afternoon, or evening, and stay free.